Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about one of these ludicrous ideas that you see a lot of people out there put out in the community who are themselves hurt because they don't know how to train. And I'm not going to name names and the usual suspects, but it seems to be pervasive in the fitness world these days. And there's already a fitness world that's scared to lift heavy and scared to max out, and I see that a lot because of the bodybuilding focus and the physique focus. That a lot of these people don't understand the value of strength, and they don't understand that serious strength training has enormous benefits well into late life. And we know that that's the case. And there are plenty of people like masters powerlifters who put up phenomenal numbers. And I'm talking about people in their 60s who compete, who are injury free, who put up numbers that most novices in their 20s, both men and women alike, would be shocked at. They would be shocked at. And these are people in their 60s sometimes. In other words, I personally know individuals, or have at least conversed with them online or know them in person, stuff like 60 plus year old women who can deadlift well over 200 pounds. 60 plus year old men who can deadlift in the 500-pound range. Okay, they're out there and they're injury free, and done correctly, this stuff is safe. It is safe. And it's one of the things that bothers me that we have to talk about out there is this fear of it. And it's the same problem we ran into. I joined one of the over 40 fitness groups to see what was up and tried to talk training like on Facebook. And there was this total absolute phobia of not only lifting heavy, but to the point to where people think it's useless. They think it's useless. And that's just so ridiculous, because you have to lift heavy if you want to get strong. And people need to remember that lifting heavy is relative. Your 1 rep max, if you've built support musculature, it's safe to do 1 rep maxes, and it's safe to do 1 rep maxes at any age within reason. Now, if you're blasting 2 grams of gear and you haven't built a proper support structure, okay, that might get dangerous. But for people who are not doing that, if they slowly build up and sequentially build up and even do something like a conjugate method like I'm doing, to where you hit a max on 2 different exercises every week, but then most of your training is geared around volume and support musculature and speed and all these things, this is perfectly safe. In fact, I would go so far as to say that lifting heavy for people over 40 is probably dramatically safer than it is for an 18-year-old. People would say, why? Because older people don't ego lift. Older people will hit their true 1 rep max with the best form that they can and try to pay attention to what they're doing. They're less likely to potato press or potato squat it. 18-year-olds will just potato a lift up. They'll potato a lift up. And surprisingly, they get hurt less often than you would think. And what people need to remember when we start talking about a lot of the health benefits, what's one of them? Bone density. We know that heavy lifting builds bone density. And what people need to, and I'm going to make this very, very clear, if you're lifting weights that you can do for 15 reps, this is what you need to understand. The data shows that you're not going to really increase bone density. Okay? You're not going to increase bone density from that. You have to lift moderately heavy. You have to lift moderately heavy. And by moderately heavy, you need it on big structural lifts. You're going to have to put weights on top of yourselves in load-bearing exercises that are heavier than your 10 rep max consistently. And if you do not, then you're not going to get the bone density benefits. You're not going to get that. Well, that is one of the most valuable benefits of heavy lifting. Now, what's going to give you a higher chance of injury prevention throughout life? The highest possible bone density. Because what injuries are middle-aged and older people most concerned with? Bone fractures. Loss of bone density making bone fractures easier. That's your actual real risk of injury. That's the reason you get hurt. The reason you get hurt. And even me, I'm about to turn 43. And what you guys are seeing are just clips here from some of just my recent weeks. I mean, obviously this is a small section of what I do for training, because I probably do dramatically more high rep work and more conditioning work and everything else than I do maxes. But we still max every week. I still go very heavy. Very heavy. Every single week. And I'm not hurt. I'm not injured. And if I do feel anything that feels like it's going to be injured, it's usually my rep work. right? It's my high rep work that seems to be my biggest concern there. And I want people to understand when I say heavy, I mean heavy. I'm not talking about doing your 5 rep max. I'm talking about lifting heavy. But that's another topic completely. Now, does that mean that as people age that they don't need to be concerned with injury? Well, of course we need to be concerned with injury. But do you want to know what staves that off? Being careful in your diet. Diet. Fatigue management. That's how we prevent injuries. Older lifters with every decade of age, we absorb less protein. For example, through our gut. It's a little less efficient. And this is what many coaches have noted. You want to know how you reduce injuries? You reduce connective tissue inflammation. How do we do that? More protein. And I think that's one of the take-homes people need to look at, too. There might be people who will follow a non-animal source protein diet when they're younger. You might get away with it then, but as protein absorption goes down as you age, and we know that protein overfeeding helps with connective tissue inflammation, particularly for older individuals, guess what? That nonsense is going to have to go. Because it's not that plant source proteins are incomplete. That's not true. It's that they have a lower bioavailability. Well, if you need to get 200 grams of quality protein in every day, means if you're going to do it without animal source products, you might be having to eat 300 or 400 grams of protein to reach those numbers. And those are the sort of numbers you need to be looking at for a 40 plus lifter. That is the sort of protein you might need to be looking at in order to keep injuries at bay. Okay. And it will facilitate better recovery. That's one of the best things you can possibly do over 40 is increase your consumption of animal source protein. Okay, that's really high on the list about controlling connective tissue inflammation. What other aspects of diet do we know based upon the literature and athletes impact injury risk? Very low-fat diets have a much higher injury rate, particularly for people doing large volumes of training. We know that from studying endurance athletes, that the larger the dietary fat intake of an endurance athlete, it is directly correlated with reduced injury rates. It seems to be protective of connective tissue. And we know that people look at things like saturated fat in the bloodstream and know that that's related to inflammation markers, but what they don't tell you is that sometimes diet causes an inverse amount of it to be in your bloodstream. People who even do a phase of like a ketogenic diet, that totally changes, reduces inflammation levels. So even if someone does like I do, to where they did keto and then they come over and they add a bunch of milk in, I'm still 50% fat in my diet. Probably still get the benefits. I've noticed connective tissue inflammation is lower. So getting enough dietary fat, avoiding dietary deficiencies, right? Those are critical. In other words, the older you get, the less you can do goofy, flexible dieting and worry about if it just fits your macros. You need to start cutting refined foods out, right? Table sugar and ice cream and Pop-Tarts and pancakes. That stuff has got to go. That stuff needs to go. Because those things will cause easier dietary deficiencies. You're going to have some malabsorption issues as you age, and therefore quality nutrition with every calorie that you consume matters. Getting more protein in, more fat, less refined garbage, making sure you're not deficient in anything. Those are the hallmarks. We need to be concerned with overuse injuries because the same thing. We're worried about connective tissue. The idea that we shouldn't lift heavy is ludicrous. That's not how we prevent the injuries, but we do need to be concerned with overuse. How do we avoid overuse? Well, because if you're going to be training really hard, and you should be training hard, you're going to have to rotate exercises. You're going to have to pay attention to things like range of motion. You're going to have to train all your joints through a full range of motion. Doesn't mean on every lift. But again, look at the people who are getting hurt, people who do nothing but pumping half reps. They don't train terminal range of motion. And they don't understand how to vary their exercises. If you're going to push an exercise hard, you may only be able to do it for a few weeks. Then you're going to have to rotate exercises. As we get older, we can't ignore those nagging aches and pains. This is why young men get hurt in the gym. They will ignore an injury that they get the warning signs 4 months before it happens, or 4 weeks. They will completely and they don't understand how to vary their exercises to avoid overuse, and we start seeing connective tissue inflammation. And that's the biggest one right there. That is the biggest one. Not paying attention to your connective tissue. Because young men, this is why young men get hurt training in the gym. This is the number one cause. It's overuse injuries. Too much volume with the same exercise, it puts tendons into a compromised position. And when it gets sore, they're like no pain, no gain. No pain, no gain. They'll just keep pushing that same exercise without deloading, without rotating it in spite of their tendons hurting because they think it's normal. Well, if you're an older lifter, you do not have that luxury. You don't have that option. If you do that, you're going to have a higher risk of injury sooner than a younger guy. So you have to rotate exercises, and you have to deload when the tendons start to hurt. Okay? You have to do those things. It's more critical. It's essential for young lifters to avoid getting hurt. It's twice as important as you get older. And that's the key. Not lifting lightweight, not avoiding heavy weight, not training like a big floppy pussy who's frail. But you do need to pay attention to your connective tissue. All right, guys. Well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.